This week on Quality Digest Live, how do you work for a boss for whom everything is urgent?
I want it now.
Now.
Plus, the 5 things that your QMS really needs. That more when we come back.
This episode of Quality Digest Live is brought to you by Mitutoyo America. Whatever your metrology challenges, Mitutoyo supports you from start to finish.
And welcome back to Quality Digest Live for December 8th, 2017. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest Editor-in-Chief, Dirk Ducharme. As I look back on 2017, I can think of a lot of technologies that we have seen either gain interest, at least in manufacturing, or maybe even positive traction in manufacturing. So things like cobots, maybe further refinements on production, 3D printing, obviously the industrial Internet of Things. And all of those are related to something that we call smart manufacturing. Now, if you haven't heard of smart manufacturing, Wikipedia, I think, has probably one of the best descriptions I've heard of it. Wikipedia describes smart manufacturing as smart manufacturing enables all information about the manufacturing process to be available when it is needed, where it is needed, and in the form that it is needed across the entire manufacturing supply chain. And of course, a lot of this is digitally oriented. So you might ask, what are some of the technologies that drive smart manufacturing? Well, Stephen Brand touches on some of these in his article, Smart Manufacturing Trends in 2017, that ran this week in Quality Digest. Now, robotics, of course, is the one that probably first comes to mind, robotics or automation. Manufacturing companies use 80% of the industrial robots in the United States, according to the National Bureau of Economic Research. Robots are also becoming easier to program and relatively cheaper to own and operate. So this is going to allow a lot of many small manufacturers to be able to afford them. So expect to see more automation showing up in smaller companies in the future, in the coming years. Another technology is augmented reality. We've talked about that a few times in the show, which is also really growing. And actually, it's growing really fast. According to the International Data Corporation, IDC, research company, global spending on products and services related to augmented reality and virtual reality will grow, get this, by more than 100% yearly, jumping from 11.4 billion this year to 214 billion in 2021. That's about a, what do you call that, a 20-time increase.
Doubling every year for the next
Doubling every year for the next 4 or 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah, crazy. So, and I mean, AR, I mean, we've talked about it before, augmented reality is proving to be useful in a lot of manufacturing and field work operations where a person has immediate access to documents, maybe work instructions, or even live help that appear in his or her eyeglasses. So this information is literally in front of their eyes when they need it. So a lot going on with augmented reality. 3D printing, it continues to grow according to Brand. 3D printing investments are expected to increase by 55% in 2017 and 72% in 2018 as modern companies increasingly integrate 3D printing into their day-to-day operations. And again, remember, 3D printing is also, as we mentioned, getting cheaper and actually more available to small companies as well. So there's a lot going on, I think. Personally, I think this is an amazing time to be in manufacturing. There's so many technologies that are now finding their way to the production floor at lower and lower costs. And despite what some doomsayers predict, I don't think you are going to see much net job loss because of all this automation and so forth. But we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the show. Hint, hint.
I can't wait.
You can't wait.
I can't wait. Well, we actually talked last week kind of about that too, about the
Yeah.
things that we perceive, but you perceive
Yeah.
as happening in technology in 2018. But it's good to understand where we've been and what 2017 has brought, because of course everything builds on itself,
Yep.
especially in the world of technology. And but I think, especially in augmented reality, virtual reality.
There's some cool stuff going on with that.
It's amazing,
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, every trade show now, almost every trade show we've been to, somebody has a booth set up, kind of, not necessarily a product, but kind of saying, hey, look what we're doing here with virtual reality, augmented reality. What do you think about it?
Yeah.
And kind of testing the market a little bit. And we're seeing that in more and more trade shows.
Well, yeah,
so.
we're going to be at IMTS in about 10 months. And,
Right,
and
exactly,
I mean,
yeah.
it's going to be, I can guarantee
It's going to be all over the place, yeah.
It's going to be all over the place
Yep.
out there, too. All right, thanks, Dirk. All right, well, also in the news this week, the American National Standards Institute could very well use your support on an important initiative, and time is running out. ANSI seeks comment on new standard proposal on process of remanufacturing is the name of this news item, which originally appeared on the ANSI website late last month, and we linked out to it in Wednesday's issue of the Quality Digest newsletter. Now, remanufacturing is actually a surprisingly large and vibrant part of the broader economy. According to the standard proposal from the Remanufacturing Institute Council, the Remanufacturing Industries Council, the RIC, the industry has an estimated annual revenue of $150. Big
150
bucks.
billion.
150 billion bucks. Did I say
150
150
billion
bucks?
bucks, yeah. It's kind of what my annual budget is, but
Thank you, Dirk. Thank you for adding that billion. Small little
Yes.
difference between 150 bucks and
150
billion
billion, yeah.
bucks.
Okay.
$150 billion,
there we go.
Dirk.
And it employs 2 people.
It employs 2 people. It employs 2 million people. So this is a large industry. Thank you. The RIC, which is an ANSI member and accredited standards developer, intends for this global standard to define the process of remanufacturing and establish specifications that characterize and differentiate it from other practices which are similar, such as recycling or repair. But they're similar, but they're very, very different.
Yeah, I've never even heard of remanufacturing as a kind of a thing.
It's a big thing,
Okay.
and I've heard of it, of course, through like printer cartridges, right?
Oh, sure. Well,
Remanufactured
that's true.
printer
Yeah.
cartridges,
Yeah,
where
yeah.
I first heard
Yeah.
of it. But really, and that's part of it. What remanufacturing does is it kind of brings old or worn parts or systems back to a like new, or in some cases a better than new condition, and it's a big business, as mentioned, especially for suppliers of aerospace and automotive parts, among others. So, big in aerospace and automotive. A lot of you out there are in those fields. ANSI and the RIC are seeking feedback from stakeholders on the development of this forthcoming international standard, and time is short, as I mentioned. They set a deadline of December 22nd, just 2 weeks from today, for comments on the specifications for the process of remanufacturing. If you want to participate during this comment period, check out the story. It's just below the video player screen right down there. And in that piece, there's a link where you can review the proposal, and there's also an email address where you can submit your opinions. So remember, the deadline is December 22nd, so you have to act pretty quickly if you want to get in as a stakeholder on the comment for that forthcoming international standard.
Right. Remember, anytime standards come out, there's always a comment period,
Right.
and that really, if it is something that affects you, whether it's an ISO standard or an ANSI standard or whatever, it's always worthwhile to involve yourself in those, because that's kind of the equivalent of voting,
Yeah.
participating in government,
It
right? Where
is.
you're participating in standards that are going to affect you, so your comment's important.
Well, we hear critiques many times of ISO or ANSI or others that say, well, they're ignoring the wishes of the users. Well, this is your opportunity
This
to
is your
not
chance,
have
yeah.
your wishes, be blown through. I mean,
Yeah.
if you have a comment and you're interested in that space, you should comment on it. Definitely
you
get
go.
out there and do it.
All right. No, excuse me, still getting over this cold.
Yeah, you are.
There was a great article this week from one of our favorite authors, Lolly Daskell. We run her stuff quite frequently, and they're always really interesting. Her article this week was How to Manage a Leader Who Makes Everything Urgent. And I thought it was really good. I think all of us at some time in our career has had a boss from whom everything has a pants on fire, gotta fix this now situation, right?
Yeah.
It's like, Mike, I need this now. And that other thing I gave you, I need that now too. And while you're at it,
Do this as well.
do this as well.
Thanks.
And if you think about it, the problem with all this is that if everything is that important, how do you know what to address first? I mean, how do you prioritize if your boss is telling you everything is got to be done now, everything is important? Well, how do you deal with that? How do you manage that, right? And that's kind of the purpose of her article. So she has kind of 5 very broad ideas on how to handle this type of situation if you're in it. So we'll run through these really quick. The first one is manage your boss. You've got to manage your boss.
Manage upwards.
And what she means by this is the way you respond to your boss's urgent requests. And it can either reinforce, how you do this, you can either reinforce his way of acting or maybe steer yourself in a healthier direction. I would actually call this first one, manage your boss, I would call this kind of the umbrella idea that kind of covers the next 4 things that we're going to talk about. So the next issue was tackle the issue head on. Ask your boss for a plan to help you deal with the competing priorities. Maybe even give your boss a binary choice. So your boss comes to you and it says, okay, Mike, I need you to do this right now. But you're already working on something that he gave you a week ago that's right now. So you give him, politely, a binary choice. You say, okay, well, thanks, boss, I'm working on this right now. You said it was really important. Now, do you want me to kind of shelve this for now and work on this, or would you rather I finish up what I'm doing and do that? Binary choices are usually really easy to make. Mm-hmm. Usually we can differentiate between, well, okay, this one or this one. Yeah, okay, this one's a little bit more important. It's easy to, when you tell people, well, boss, I've got 5 things on my plate, which one do you want? Mm-hmm. That makes it harder. So, and this was actually my suggestion, not hers. I think presenting a binary choice makes it easier for your boss to kind of go, okay, well, maybe this one's more important. Go ahead and do that.
Yeah, some of the ones, don't wait until there are 5 things.
Don't wait until there are 5 things. Kind of like you just gave me something, I'm working on something. Let's parse this right now.
Each one comes in.
Well, there you go.
You need to ask that question.
Yeah, so I mean, basically, you're asking him, do you want me to continue with what I have or jump on the new one? Don't wait until your boss approaches you and asks you why you haven't done what you were just told to do. You don't want to hold it off. You want to nip it right at the bud. Right. Okay, the third suggestion is manage expectations. If you're concerned that you can't finish the assignment on time, or that doing so will keep you from meeting another priority, you need to keep your boss informed. Now, this kind of only makes sense, but it is probably even more critical when you have a boss for whom everything is important. I think being able to keep them on top of where you're at with these urgent requests. Sometimes when somebody gives you an urgent request, the idea is, well, it's got to be done right now. But sometimes they can't be done right now because of other things going on. Maybe you have to wait for somebody else to finish something before you can address the boss's request. So keeping your boss in the loop is critical.
Yep.
Talk with, and this kind of goes with it, this 4th one, talk with your boss frequently. Daskell writes that it's important to keep your boss updated on your progress, both the good and the bad news, and where you might need help in the future. So if you are struggling with an assignment or have finished it ahead of schedule, let the boss know. Another benefit of frequent communication with the boss is that you will have a chance to build rapport, which will make it easier for you to communicate during, let's say, more difficult times.
Which happens.
Right, and again, I think very often when you have somebody for whom everything is urgent, I think very often that's because there's a lack of communication. Yeah. The boss comes to you and says, do this, and then walks away. Right. Comes back and do this, and then walks away. Well, if there's no communication, or if there's no rapport that's developed, then the boss isn't necessarily understanding what the implications of everything being urgent are, because he's just issuing edicts and walking away without any feedback. Yeah. So kind of all of what she's describing here are ways to give feedback to the boss, to keep the boss in the loop, to understand the ramifications of everything being urgent.
Yeah.
Finally, identify your own priorities. Depending on your other duties and tasks, there may be good reasons to shift your boss's request down the list. You just have to discuss it with her, right? You need to identify a schedule for yourself and for your boss and communicate what you expect to get done on that schedule. As long as you can commit to a specific time, that will often be sufficient. And I think that's another thing that happens is very often misconstrue what our boss means when they say, okay, I got to have this done now. Well, if you really kind of pinned him down, well, do you really mean like now, like in the next 10 minutes? Or can I work this into my schedule so like, I can really get to this on Monday and get it complete. Would that work? Well, yeah, sure. You know what I'm saying is like, a lot of times I think that communication is not that it has to be done right now, is just the way that person communicates.
Sure.
It's important.
Yeah.
Well, now if you try to nail them down to a schedule, all of a sudden, well, yeah, a week out, yeah, that's fine for me.
Right.
But if you didn't ask that, you don't know. You don't know, exactly. So these are all good ideas.
They're great ideas. I mean, as you were talking about this article, as I read it, I thought about the collaboration story we covered last week. Can you collaborate too much? There's a psychology that goes into this too. There's a certain type of person in a work environment, and there are actually people that tend to get promoted and do pretty well that never say no, and always are just people pleasers. They're brown nosers, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
They always want to take on any task, and they always want to jump in. They always want to do things, and will never say no to a boss, which isn't really a good thing.
Right.
Again, we talked a little bit about work-life balance. If you say, well, I don't care about my life, I'm just going to give my life to this company, and there are people out there who do that.
Sure. Yeah.
Then sure, you can ostensibly take on a lot of stuff, but that pressure cooker in your brain is always getting more and more to the top, and at some point you're going to explode because you're going to feel overwhelmed, and you're not going to get any of those tasks done. You're going to do them in a half-baked kind of way. So you're not really doing anybody any favors by being a martyr and just always saying yes to a boss or to your coworkers. I mean, at some point you've got to have enough boundaries to say, no, I for the good of myself.
Yeah.
And for the good of the company, I need to say no a little bit.
Well, sometimes I'm not sure it's even about saying no. I think it's just about saying, you're my boss. You're telling me to do this. I'm saying yes, but let's look at how to work this in, work this into the schedule, because unless you've got somebody who's a complete tyrant, which does happen. They're out there. Sure. They're out there. But I think most of the time it's kind of like, I'm agreeing with you. This is important. Sure. Okay. Yeah. So here's my schedule. Let's take. Does this work for you?
Right.
And then it's kind of, now you're involving them in the discussion, and they're still in control. They can say, oh yeah, well, not Monday, but how about can you have it done by Friday?
Yeah.
Well, at least now you're getting some guidelines set up.
And if the boss has any kind of emotional intelligence, he or her is going to begin to kind of understand these things and be a little less. You're going to always be demanding because you want to get the work done, but you're going to be a little more understanding going in of, oh wait, I just gave you that like 2 days ago, something that was really urgent.
Right.
Let me hold my horses. Let me find somebody else so I can give that to that's urgent. Spread the urgency out amongst other people in the team. And again, it comes back to this idea there's some people that want to be superstars in the organization that always say, give it to me, give it to me, give it to me.
Right.
The bosses and those people need to work together to spread that out and let other people kind of get their oars in the water as well.
Yep. Good stuff by Lolly.
Good stuff by Lolly. Psychology is really important in the workplace, folks. Don't ever think those soft skills aren't important, because it really makes things work or not in the workplace. All right. Well, not surprisingly, I think given the general topic areas that Quality Digest plays in, one of the elements that our editorial often consider is the nature of the quality management system. Most of the time we think about a QMS holistically as an interlocking series of actions that combine to ensure that your organization can deliver products and services that meet the demands of your customers. Sometimes, however, in order to really improve your QMS, you need to kind of look at the tools that allow you to pull its elements apart and consider them as discrete entities. Not necessarily all that holistically, but also holistically as well as the component parts. And that's really the takeaway in the article, 5 Things Your Quality Management System Needs by Tim Lozier of ETQ. You can see it right there. It ran in the Quality Digest newsletter on Tuesday a few days ago. Now, the 5 elements that Lozier talks about in this article are flexibility, traceability, risk-based thinking, integration, and reporting. So I want to take a few minutes to consider each of these and maybe discuss them with you, Dirk, and kind of talk about why they're so important to a tools-based approach to a superior QMS. And again, I mean, understand that Tim's coming to this from ETQ.
Sure.
Actually doing a webinar with ETQ on this very topic next week, which I'll talk about at the end of the segment. But so understand, he's talking about this from a tools-based perspective. He's talking about the things that you can do using software or other tools to improve your QMS and how that works. So The first one he's talking about here is flexibility, and the key word is configurable. I mean, too often those that help organizations manage their QMS expect you to adapt your systems to their solutions. I mean, instead, you really should be able to make the tool do your bidding for things like forms and reports, checklists, whatever you need to do. I mean, you're the customer. I mean, it's your QMS. You are the one that needs to answer to an auditor, right, at some level ultimately, about why you have systems in place and how you can ensure that ultimately what the deliverable is which is to deliver good products and services to your customers, are supported by what your QMS does and what the tools that you use to use your QMS does. So if you're jumping through hoops to bring in, let's say, a software system that you have to change a lot of what you're doing to fit into a bunch of boxes, that doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make sense, right?
You really need it to be configurable to what you're doing. You don't want to have to do more work to get it to that format first and then begin to understand how it fits. Do it the other way first. That's a better idea.
Right.
The other one is traceability. A big part of this involves kind of the sense of connection amongst those disparate sections of the enterprise. Many times, quality is lost, and so actually sometimes is gained as well in the handoffs from one functional area to the next. And Lozier considers the example, say, of a customer complaint. It's a perfect example. We see this all the time, right? I mean, ideally, in a tools-based, optimized QMS, the key data from the customer, which is like stuff like their name, their account number, their pricing information, their discounts they have, whatever it is going to have to be rekeyed from department to department. That happens a lot, actually, but it shouldn't have to be that way. The system should be able to suck that data through, so every handoff has the information. I mean, we've all had this experience where you have to repeat your customer, your name or your account number or your issue. What's your problem? Oh my gosh!
I just told them.
Done this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
you know, in the phone tree, it's like it's crazy making. So consider your customer, and if you're going to have an automated QMS, you want that kind of visibility that goes through your system from handoff to handoff. The other one is risk-based thinking, and really this, of course, is a big part of ISO 9001:2015. Risk-based thinking really means, first of all, investigating and categorizing the hazards unique to your enterprise. I mean, here we begin to understand the limits maybe of the tool-based approach a little bit, because while you can automatically evaluate risk, assessing what those risks mean for your enterprise requires a certain level of human interaction, right? I mean, you can do an FMEA and get a risk priority number, but unless there's a human being in there to analyze that and consider what that really means and how you can maybe mitigate that risk, you're not getting anything out of your RPN.
Right.
So that's really important.
Or does that RPN even make sense?
Even make sense.
Because sometimes it's like, really?
Yeah.
Honestly, that doesn't make sense.
Or maybe you look at it, you're like, really? And then you look at it like, it does make sense. You really look at how those things multiply. And you also need to determine what you're going to do about your risk. I mean, there's 5 things that they mentioned in the article that Tim mentions. You can accept the risk, you can reduce them, you can compensate for them, you can transfer them, or you can avoid them altogether. So that's part of the analysis phase of that too, that kind of requires a human being to look at that. The fourth point here is integration. This one is akin to point 2 regarding traceability. Silos are the enemy of quality, which by its very essence is a cross-functional exercise, of course. By integrating these various areas of the enterprise, the team gains better visibility overall, which leads to faster spotting of issues and increased collaboration, which are all good things. Fifth and finally is reporting. Now, data can be your enemy as easily as it can be your friend. When you have an active tool-based QMS, you create a lot of data. We know this. Being able to dive into all that information and kind of tease out those few critical bits of information that really can move the needle for your enterprise, it really is the difference between a QMS that works really well and one that's really just getting by. So that is a really important piece of this, is understanding that information and what your QMS is telling you and what you're deriving from.
Now, one thing that kind of strikes me about all this is, if you think about it, the evolution of QMS software has, in a sense, followed the evolution of ISO 9001. Because I don't know if you remember, I mean, back in the first version, ISO 9001, 1988 or whatever the heck
87,
it was, 87. It was literally just checkboxes.
Yeah, it was.
And there was, and everybody did basically the same thing, regardless of whether you manufactured ball bearings or aircraft landing gear or were a service company. It's like everybody did the same thing.
There was very little service, by the way.
There was very little service,
yeah. Registered ISO 9001.
That's true, yeah.
Manufacturing.
So it was all this kind of very constrained, everybody handled the standard the same way. Right. And then as ISO 9001 evolved from a process approach to a process approach, and then looking at risk-based thinking. The software that went along with all this has had to expand as well to encompass greater and greater flexibility for the different companies that are trying to implement a QMS.
Which is great.
Because
for
the original
organizations.
software also
Yeah.
was checkbox software. Yeah, exactly.
But that's a great thing for these organizations because, again, it gets you from having a certificate on the wall is the reason to have an ISO 9001 certification to
actually getting
isn't
value.
improving your organization, your customer service. So for those of you who are interested in this topic, I think many of you probably are, you're in luck because you don't have to really suffer through me, paraphrasing Tim Lozier's words. We're actually going to be offering a webinar titled 5 Things Your Quality Management System Could Use Right Now and 5 Ways to Get It. It's going to be presented by Tim Lozier himself and hosted by my partner right over here, Dirk. The webinar happens in just a few days on Tuesday, December 12th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. You can see it right there. So keep an eye on your email inbox if you want to register, or you can click on the story link just below or just to the right of this video player screen. And there's a link in there where you can register for this really interesting webinar.
That's right. And Tim always does a great job.
So check that out.
All right. So circling back to the first story that we did today on automation and all the new trends that are happening in manufacturing. Research companies like Forrester project that a net 10 million jobs will be lost to robots. That's a net, and the way they break it down is, according to Forrester, that automation will displace something like 24.7 million jobs by 2027, but will also create 14.9 million new jobs. So a net loss of about 10 million jobs. Now, some research analysts predict that the loss will be more, some will predict less. I actually disagree that there will be many major net job loss at all. I don't think we're going to see much net job loss at all. But I want to know what you think. I mean, do you think that new technology helps or hurts jobs? I mean, are there any maybe historical examples that you can think of? I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I have to think back historically. I mean, certainly when you look at the industrial revolutions over the course of time, you know, the term Luddite we talk about a lot was actually a real thing. Ned Ludd was a guy who broke the machines in the 18th century in England because they were losing their jobs as weavers, I think it was. Were losing their jobs to these automated looms. So I mean, there's been this history throughout history, this time of this. You know, Bill Evanson used an example in an article he wrote for us saying, you know, the steam shovel displaced all those, you know, diggers, people that dug ditches for a living. But you know, those weren't exactly great jobs that anybody wanted. You know, you didn't have you raise your kid and say, wow, you're going to be a ditch digger someday, right? I mean, there were jobs you wanted to get rid of. I mean, so the analogy now is what types of jobs are these going to be replacing in the future? You know, we're struggling in this country to keep manufacturing jobs and try to expand manufacturing jobs. We've both talked about this, that probably that's a wrong-headed approach because those jobs are going to go away. I mean, they're going to go away to they already are going away to cheaper overseas labor, and they're going to ultimately go away en masse to automation. And trying to fight to keep them is kind of a race to the bottom because they're not really good jobs that really contribute a lot. They do give some people some level of subsistence earnings and don't have to use state resources to live. So that's a benefit. But I mean, are those the jobs we want? Or is there an idea that these destructive technologies are going to create jobs that we can't even think of yet at a higher level that are worth more? Net, it's going to derive more for the economy. Those people at the bottom of the economy are probably, going to suffer from it. I don't know what to do to fix that other than to give them opportunities to get more education and get into the workforce at a higher level.
I think this is the thing is I think there's two separate issues. One is there going to be net job loss, which I honestly think no. But
I think there will be.
Well,
I think there will be net job loss, but I think there will be net revenue. How should I put this? There'll be an increase in the amount of GDP overall from this, and that the jobs that are there will be worth more.
Well, I guess this is
the 14-hour jobs are going to be hurt. Those net jobs are going to go away.
I think jobs are going to go away, but I guess what I come back to is I actually grew up in the days of the Silicon Valley boom, right? Now, if you think think of the impact that technology that came out of the tech boom, started in the 70s,
Yeah.
right? Think of how many jobs were lost to that.
Sure.
Who has a secretarial pool anymore?
Right.
Because you got a computer.
Right.
Right? Think of all the secretarial jobs that were lost. I mean, if you just look at technology and think of all the jobs that were lost to technology, but look at what jobs were created by the tech boom. I mean, you had people inventing things now in their garages that they never could, and becoming entrepreneurs and selling
But how many of
things.
those secretaries got jobs from that?
No, they lost their jobs. But I'm saying net.
What happened to them over the course of time after that? I'm saying
I
that
agree.
level of job is going to suffer.
I agree with you. But I think we're talking, and I'm not discounting the loss, that people lose a job that sucks.
Of course it does.
For them.
For them.
Okay, but as a whole,
I'm agreeing with you. We're saying the same thing, but I mean, you're talking about net job loss. There will be a net job loss. There will be a certain number of jobs that are going to go away.
But I think they're going to be more than replaced by new jobs. That's what I'm saying.
I think they will be replaced by new jobs. I think they will be more than replaced by new jobs in terms of the value of the salary that those jobs offer. But in terms of a 1-to-1 ratio, it won't be replaced. If you lose, if automation takes away 10 million jobs, it might create 1 million jobs that are 10 or 20 times more valuable, but it's still a loss of 9 million jobs. The 9 million people that don't have work. The 1 million that do have work will have better jobs worth more, so overall the value will be higher, but there will be a net job loss, I think, at the lower levels of the economic scale. The solution to that is raising people up to have better skills so they can compete for those better jobs. You know, people that are working at McDonald's right now or are assembling stuff online somewhere that don't have educations, don't have a high level of education. That goes for me too. I just have a bachelor degree. I mean, probably a lot of us who have bachelor degrees as well are going to probably start feeling the squeeze on a lot of this stuff too. Especially if you have a science and technology background, which is why we talk about STEM education all the time. You know, kids need to have an understanding of this, of science, technology, engineering, and math. It's really, really critically important. I mean, I'm an English major. You do the math, but I mean, it's like
I can't do the math. I'm an English major.
You know,
I don't know how to do math.
But I mean, it's true. I mean, there's a certain level of sure. For me, it was a great pathway. I found my way into a career in media. But I mean, the jobs that are going to be explosively growing in the future are not going to be those kind of jobs. They're going to be technology jobs. And you're going to need to have that kind of a background to get them. So the takeaway here is it going to be net job loss? I think there will be, but those people that are going to lose those jobs either have to retrain themselves or make sure that their kids get trained adequately for the jobs that are coming, because there will be a lot of jobs and a lot of really good jobs, but there won't be as many as there are now.
And check back here in 5 years, and we'll tell you how that. We'll tell you how that all panned out.
Man, I don't know. It's a great question though, Dirk. Thanks for bringing that one up.
Sure,
man. I don't know how it's going to turn out. We're going to keep on tracking it for you. All right, well, that's our show for the week. But before we go, of course, we want to thank our sponsor. Mitutoyo Corporation is the world's largest provider of measurement and inspection solutions, offering the most complete selection of machines, sensors, systems, and services, with a line encompassing CMMs, vision, form, and finish measuring machines, as well as precision tools and instruments and metrology data management software. Mitutoyo's nationwide network of metrology centers and support operations provides application calibration, service repair, and educational programs to ensure that their more than 6,000 metrology products will deliver measurement solutions for their customers. For more information, visit mitutoyo.com or click on the banner just below or just to the right of this video player screen down there.
That's right. And don't forget that next week we're offering the webinar 5 Things Your Quality Management System Could Use Right Now and 5 Ways to Get It, presented by Tim Lozier of ETQ and hosted by yours truly here. The webinar happens on Tuesday, December 12th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. Keep an eye on your email inbox for your invitation to see what's sure to be a great presentation.
It will be, no doubt. And that's it for this week's show. Join us next week for the last QDL of the year, Dirk. We're not doing one on the 22nd, so we have a bonanza show, a lot of guests, a lot of excitement on the show next week, so tune in for that. And check back with us on Monday as well for Quality Digest newsletter, full week of that too. So we'll see you next week. Have a great weekend. We'll see you then.
So
bye.